Eric, all year we've heard heartbreaking stories from people who have lost loved ones across Seattle. We reached that homicide record last week. Then there was another deadly shooting over the weekend in the U District. That brought the record up to 73. I sat down with the police chief this morning to ask him what's being done to keep our neighborhoods safer in the new year. They are horrific stories of violence that rocked communities across Seattle.
We are doing everything we can to recover guns, to reduce this level of violence.
From the random execution of businesswoman Eina Kwon and her unborn baby in Belltown.
From my heart, I only can say we all victims.
To a deadly stabbing that shocked Bitter Lake and marked the city's 72nd homicide of the year. What do you attribute to those numbers?
Homelessness has been a huge driver of it. Almost 20% of our homicides are related to homelessness. 8% is related to domestic violence.
In our sit-down interview with Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, he says another main factor is the boost in the number of rounds being fired. SPD reports 75% of the homicides in Seattle are gun-related.
In a lot of youth-related or gang-related shootings, it's not just 1 round or 2 rounds being fired. It's multiple. It's over a dozen rounds being fired.
He's hopeful for a turnaround in the new year with support from the new city council and SPD's new task force that he reports has recovered 38 guns from prolific offenders since the summertime.
That is going to be our big driver of this. And we're already seeing that reduction in violent crime.
A challenging task as SPD's staffing crisis sits at a shortage of 375 officers. The department has a goal of filling at least a third of its vacancies in 2024 as it works to address the many drivers of these crimes. Chief Diaz also adds that in the new year, SPD will be implementing a new system for people to report any type of crime. They'll also be getting license plate readers on every patrol unit to try to catch car thieves to help cut down on property crime as well. For now, live in Seattle, Jackie Kent. Here to talk about a grim milestone, the city of Seattle hitting a record number of homicides for the year at 72 just last week, then another homicide over the weekend in the U District. What's your reaction when you hear about this grim milestone?
Yeah, you know, this is the numbers that we don't want to experience. We don't want to see record numbers that we saw in 1994. So it's been a long time to experience those, but you know, we are actually seeing a violent crime reduction this year. We're starting to get into what we call a 5-year weighted average. So we're actually looking at numbers that are pre-pandemic, and we're actually experiencing our violent crime is actually reducing. But when you actually see these homicide numbers, you're trying to figure out what's driving that.
I did want to go back to violent crime in a little bit, but first talking about the homicide rate. Of course, there's no singular reason for the increase, but what do you attribute to those numbers?
Yeah, so 2 of the deaths are actually delayed deaths. So they occurred in previous years. An incident happened where it could have been a shooting, could have been some other altercation that now the death actually occurred in this year. We also had baby Kwon that right now prosecutor's office is not looking at making that charge. Because they have certain criteria to meet to identify whether it's a homicide or not. So that's actually incorporated into the numbers. And so when you actually start to look at what's experienced, homelessness has been a huge driver of it. Almost 20% of our homicides are related to homelessness. 8% is related to domestic violence. And you know, we had a very tragic incident that happened in the North End where somebody set a house on fire and ended up, you know, killing the wife. And the 2 children. And so you have cases that are extremely tragic in that. But one of the biggest drivers right now is the increased amount of rounds that are being fired when there actually is a shooting. We know that 75% of our shootings are 75% of homicides are gun related.
You did start a task force this summer to tackle gun violence. Do you have any update on how that's working out?
Yeah, so we actually ran it from around June to September. We recovered 38 guns, really targeting the most prolific offenders that are known to be shooters. And it actually saw a big reduction, a 9% reduction in it. But when you're actually pulling staff from all over the department, we had to then restore some of those officers back to the respective units. But we did see huge levels of positive outcomes. We're actually right now on pace to recover more guns than we've ever recovered, even with the short staffing. And we're only 20 guns short, and with the whole month of December still left, well, in the last couple of days, but we should probably surpassed the amount of gun recoveries in all the years that we've been actually reviewing that.
That's great. In addition to gun recoveries, do you believe this program could have potentially prevented more homicides from happening?
Well, really, it's really targeting the people that are more propensity for violence and gun violence. So we know that homeless encampments are a struggle to us to be able to monitor and understand all the dynamics of when a homicide could occur. But we also do know that when there are sometimes gang rivalries that are occurring, youth that are fighting with each other, that actually has an increased level that we have to be able to address. Most of the times now we're experiencing in a lot of youth-related or gang-related shootings, it's not just 1 round or 2 rounds being fired. It's multiple. It's over a dozen rounds being fired, up to 100 rounds being fired. In some of these cases, even just as of last week, we had 3 dozen rounds being fired in the Pioneer Square mass shooting. No one was killed, but 5 people were hit. And when you have 3 dozen rounds that were fired, that there is a propensity for a lot of victims and a lot of trauma that occurs.
Do you hope to continue this program into the new year?
Yeah, I mean, we're right now, we're spending a lot of our units that are taking time looking at addressing carjackings, because carjackings are resulting into robberies that are occurring on the streets. So, anything from the north end around the high schools to the south end and around the high schools. We're also seeing convenience stores. Not only is the city of Seattle experiencing it, but we also know the south end, Tacoma, Pierce County, Bellevue is all experiencing a lot of these carjackings / robberies. And so we have to be all working together with the other agencies to be able to solve some of these cases.
You had mentioned the officer shortage. What's the updated number of officers that are needed, and what's the department and the city doing to help bring more officers to Seattle? Yeah,
so we're still down about 375 officers. We're actually this year was our first year. We're coming closer to actually being where we're hiring, and the amount of people leaving are almost the same. Not quite there yet, but we hope the next year. We're seeing more applicants, more people driving interest into becoming a Seattle police officer. And to us, this is really important. A lot of big agencies, we have a lot of opportunities. We really want to make sure that we recruit the best, and I've actually, we've had about 150 people that are laterals that have applied for our agency, and I can tell you we've only hired about 4 or 5 of them, which tells me that our people are actually making sure that we hire the best and brightest, even though that they could be officers in other areas, so we just don't want to have other people's issues. We really want to make sure that we're hiring good people.
Because that's such a long, drawn-out process to get the right people in the department, we've heard from countless business owners and neighbors when we respond to crimes who are frustrated that the police department doesn't have the staffing to do regular patrols. What's your message to these neighborhoods? Yeah,
we're trying to make sure that we put officers in the right area. We actually, starting last year, we actually were seeing a reduction over the last 5 months of the year. We're actually still on that same pace this year to see that same reduction. In fact, this month we'll actually see probably less reports of calls for service and less calls, or not less reports that are being written this month for violent crime. So we're actually seeing a good pace of that drop in crime, but it's taken a long time. And when you have to put it into context, we lost over 600 officers. We're down about 375 officers. That still creates a huge impact. So we're trying to figure out what technology we can actually look at doing to increase our efficiencies. So next year, I'm really excited. We're doing an new online reporting system that makes it easier for people to report crime. We're actually looking at CCTV. So we actually had the funding to be able to put cameras in to be able to address and review different types of violent crime that could be occurring in our city streets, especially in the downtown core. AGLS, which is the automatic gunshot locator, we know shots fired to increase, to figure out how do we use technology to be able to put our officers in those right areas. And then we're having ALPRs, which is license plate readers, that right now we already currently have that, but we're going to have every patrol car that have access to doing that. So we know that they're going to be able to spot stolen vehicles, and that has seen a huge increase this year. We had 9,000 vehicles that are stolen this year in the city of Seattle. But actually having every patrol car literally driving around, being able to run a vehicle plate automatically, we're going to be able to spot more and hopefully recover more vehicles.
That's great. Is there anything else other than the officer shortage and the need for this new technology that could be hindering the department in working to reduce these homicide numbers?
No, I mean, we're excited for a new city council coming in. We are excited for new levels of support. We're trying to prepare, as the city prepares for World Cup in 2026, we got to make sure our officer staffing has, obviously an increased level of staffing. We got to make sure that we're driving violent crime down. We got to be addressing overall crime as well. Putting officers in the right place. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I can tell you our officers are working hard, and we also make sure we got to retain our good officers. So we have to make sure that they have a good contract, and that makes them competitive with all these other agencies in the Puget Sound.
You had mentioned the positive sign about overall violent crime decreasing. What do you attribute to that decrease?
I think we've had really, really good police work that's being done. Our officers and detectives are working hard to, really solve a lot of crime. They're actually finding a lot of repeat offenders that are. We don't have a lot of people that are just doing overall crime. We have people that are repeatedly doing that, and if we can really target that, we've worked with the city attorney on targeting high offender list, and so those are the people that we really want to make sure that we address. We also know that a lot of issues around social issues, such as people drug usage, we've actually in the last 2 months have made almost over 70 to 80 contacts in people smoking fentanyl, and that's also been a driver of overdose deaths. So we've got to figure out how do we reduce the amount of fentanyl that comes into the city as well. So there's a lot of things that I think has been a driver. We know that about 12% of our homicides has some sort of narcotics nexus. So the more we can actually reduce the amount of narcotics coming in, that should also see a reduction in those homicides as well.
How feasible is it for officers to make those contacts? Is the department still focused primarily on calls of violence?
Yeah, I mean, when you have short staffing and you're down 375 officers, you really do have to focus on the violent crime. And like I said, we've seen that reduction, that's a positive reduction. It's hard really when it comes to property crime to see, not everybody's reporting it, and we know that consistently when it comes to reporting numbers, but we are seeing overall crime down 10%. But we encourage people to report crime, and that's the only way we can be able to know what's going on in the communities. If we don't have people reporting it, we're just not able to really put our officers in those spots.
Speaking of working with neighborhoods, one group we talk with a lot are the folks off 23rd and Jackson with the daycare that had their windows shattered when it got shot in a drive-by shooting. They said their neighborhood has enjoyed working with police to figure out how to make that neighborhood safer. Can you talk about that work you've been doing, the changes that have happened there, and are you looking to work with other neighborhoods?
Yeah, we've actually put one of our mobile precincts right across the street. We've had a lot of good officers that are getting out of their patrol cars and talking with the businesses, talking with the organization, and just having a visible presence. We know that it's a challenge because we also have Garfield. We've seen a little bit of violence last school year, and it's coupled into this school year that we're trying to address. But the more we can do in each and every one of our communities, the better off we are.
So you attend their monthly meetings and just in constant communication. How does that relationship work?
Yeah, so our staff at the East Precinct has been in communication with there. We actually have community engagement specialists that are also communicating with them. And then we also are looking at not just addressing that area. We had 12th and Jackson, 3rd and Pine. We've hit the South End. We've also hit Aurora. So we are looking at making sure that throughout every part of our city that we have a really good emphasis on very specific areas of potential violence that could happen.
Going back to the homicide numbers, a lot of people still coping with senseless violence happening across the city, even though there are so many efforts to keep that from happening. What is your message to these business owners and neighbors?
Really what we really need is to get a lot of the guns off the streets that we've seen this type of violence. When I look at 4 years ago, we recovered about 2,500 shell casings. This year, we're on pace to recover 5,400 shell casings, almost double the amount of shootings or shots fired that are actually occurring. So when an actual shooting happens, we're actually seeing less shots fired, but more rounds being fired when an actual gun is actually on the street. We got to recover those guns. We're actually seeing Glock switches, so guns that are switching it from a semi-automatic to an automatic gun. We're seeing magazines that are 50-round drum magazines. 50 rounds being fired as an automatic gun is going to create harm, and it's going to create chaos in the community. And so the more we can get those guns off the streets, the more people can let us know and keep us aware about where guns could be. That is going to be helping us reduce this level of violence. We also have to know when there's disturbances or issues, large-scale events, and we have to make sure that we have a visible presence. You think of Capitol Hill Block Party, we had Safeway, we had the Hookah Lounge, and we had Pioneer Square. So when large people congregate, we've got to figure out to make sure how do we mitigate those issues that potentially result in a gunfire.
Chief, any other planning or positive signs for a turnaround in the new year?
Yeah, I think all of the work that we've been doing, our detectives and our officers that are actually finding those high offenders, that is going to be our big driver of this. And we're already seeing that reduction in violent crime. So we have more to come, and again, like for our numbers, sometimes this year has a level of a high level of homicides, but we've also seen in 2016, they were literally on the same number, and they had 31 homicides. So it's really the driver is the shootings, and how do we actually make sure that we get those guns off? I think we have that plan.
Right. Is there a specific number of officers the department has a goal of hiring this year?
Oh, well, we want to hire over 125, and I will how to make sure that we retain all of our good officers, and then we also want to make sure that, so it's retaining officers and it's hiring more officers than have left. So the better, the more the merrier. So I would say, if people are interested in working in policing, come apply for us. We are hiring, and we're looking for good officers.
Great. 125 for the new year, or that was this year?
125 is what we want to hire for next year.
Got it. Anything else, Chief, you'd like to add that's important for people to know?
I think really what we really want to make sure is that this city is safe, and we are doing everything we can to recover guns, to reduce this level of violence. We are seeing, a good reduction, but we have our challenges too. We have challenges of social issues, narcotics and homelessness, and a variety of different other things. And we need a lot of support. That's the reason why we're working with CARE, our third department, our fire department, and figuring out other social services that can help reduce that level of burden.
Fantastic. Chief, those are all of our questions. Thanks so much.